Many years ago, when I was on board a Plymouth-based ship, I would drive out into the East Devon countryside. Often I would visit the Benedictine monastery at Buckfastleigh. At that time it had a quiet and spiritual atmosphere which invited a slowing down in life. However, on my last visit, it was busier than Disneyland and about as commercial. Monks had been replaced with less than gracious staff behind constantly ringing tills. Worse still, it is known now less as a centre of contemplation than the producers of the infamous Buckie wine. Yet still the memory of the original Christian community lives on in my aspirations. Perhaps that's why I always see the congregations I've been involved in as communities of reflection in this busy, in fact over-busy world. And through that rediscovered sacredness, we find the energy to make others' lives better. Well, I leave it to you to decide whether this is a worthy ambition and to what extent together we might achieve it. But at least in my own defence I can cite Paul. For today we heard him writing to the new followers of Jesus in Rome. At that time the city was obviously the centre of its empire and had around 1 million inhabitants. This was vast by ancient standards, and still equates to be slightly smaller than Birmingham today. Now these early Christians would be mostly of Jewish origin, and Judaism of that time was very much focused on making your life a sacred space. That's why there was so much emphasis on dietary laws, laws that would effectively fence off the sacredness in obedience to God's commands. And this is what Paul is playing into in his letter. He's transferring the observance of Jewish laws to those he considered to be the demands of the gospel. More directly, he was transforming the search for the sacred from doing to behaving. He indeed was inviting you into Christ's message of love. Yet Rome must have been a melting pot of religions and philosophies. It would have been a place of learning, but it also would have been a den of corruption, vice and excess, since that's the truth of any city, large or small. Paul therefore knew to follow the gospel solo would have been very near impossible. But in sacred groupings, holy communities and loving fellowships, there was a real chance the gospel seed would flourish and Christ would live. Now at that time there was no name for these collectors that were breaking away from their local synagogues. But in time these would indeed get a name we understand today, and that name was ecclesia, or in translation, a congregation. Yet what was Paul's specific demands of these assemblies of believers? Well, we can read it for ourselves in his letter. Since there, the Roman congregations in our own are asked to live in love of each individual, love of our community, and as important, love of harmony, cooperation and inclusion. And that isn't a bad set of rules for any team. It isn't a bad set of aspirations for any family, club or society. Above all, surely, it must be the founding behaviour of any ecclesia seeking to find the sacred. Since it's in that discovery alone, we find the risen Christ and his solace in life's mad scramble. Is there, however, still a need for monasteries? Is indeed there still a thirst for places of contemplation? How are sacred oases going to attract people in a social media fueled 24/7 Britain? A long time ago I visited another monastery, and that was Mont Saint-Michel in Normandy. And of course it's one of the most famous buildings in the world. Yet to get to its chapel at the Mount's peak, you are faced with many hurdles. As you enter the medieval gate at sea level, you are faced with a long climb up a narrow street of overhanging houses. Each sport a shop selling food, souvenirs and other ancillary tat. The horde of visitors, wearily clambering upwards, are assailed by a vast collection of hawkers selling their wares. Then it's past a set of rather smelly toilets to the monastery's entrance itself. Finally, after having paid a fairly hefty entry fee, you get some peace in the rather bare chambers and sanctuary of this historic setting. Yet it's only when you think that the whole venture was a bit of a swizz do you discover the beautiful cloister. Surrounded by summer blooms and grass and Italian marble, you find what you are looking for, the sacred. And as you wander around that high place in its welcome shade, you encounter a full-length plate-glass window looking far down on the Seine estuary. There, away on the sands, do you see a few human beings walking, human beings you will never know. But in your newfound serenity, you reach out to them in the harmony of God's creation. And if that's not sacredness, I'm not sure what is. Well, that story takes me to another aspect of communities that attract the term ecclesia. For that word also contains the meaning of calling out. Therefore, monasteries call us out of the world towards the sacred. Churches call us out to display the behaviour described by Paul. Our very own congregations call us out to love one another as a community. But in the end of the day, it all depends on how we respond. The result then is a simple choice. While in Rome, do as the Romans do. Or whilst in the congregation of Christ's followers, do we do as we are being called out to do? Do we search for the sacred? Do you build a sanctuary for love? Are you indeed welcomed home?